Hello and welcome to Investment Insight. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Now let's break down what's happening in the markets today in a clear and simple way.
Thanks for having me back.
So, when you think of artificial intelligence, you probably picture like a really sleek app on your smartphone, right? Or maybe a chatbot that casually writes a polite email to your boss.
Yeah, exactly. We all tend to think of the digital world as this invisible floating software.
But according to some really fascinating recent analysis from April 2026, that is just not the case. The reality is that the AI industry is currently the heaviest, most concrete-intensive physical construction project on the planet.
It really is. I mean, that invisible magic trick on your phone actually requires tearing up the earth, pouring thousands of tons of concrete, and completely rewiring the global power grid.
It's wild. And to help us, actually navigate this from an investment standpoint, we are going to look at a concept introduced by NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang. It's called the five-layer AI cake.
Right, the AI cake. It's essentially this ultimate roadmap that breaks down a massive, intimidating technological shift into a physical, step-by-step supply chain.
And our mission for this deep dive today is to slice straight through that entire cake. We're talking energy, chips, infrastructure, models, and applications.
Because, the financial media is just completely obsessed with software profit margins right now. They just want to know who has the smartest chatbot.
Exactly. But the data shows we should actually be looking at heavy industrial permits and utility regulations to figure out where the real money is flowing.
Yeah, the broader market often gets blinded by the shiny application at the very top. But every single time a new AI software tool succeeds, it immediately pulls this massive physical demand down through every single layer underneath it.
Because you can't run the software without the hardware.
Right. And that specialized hardware is basically useless without a colossal industrial facility to plug it into.
Which means we have to start at the absolute bedrock. Let's look at the foundational layer, which is energy. Sticking with our baking theme, this is the oven.
I love that analogy. You can have the finest flour and sugar in the world, but without a functioning oven, you just have a bowl of raw ingredients.
Exactly. And the data we are looking at regarding power consumption is, well, it's almost hard to comprehend.
It's staggering.
The U.S. Energy Information Administration, the EIA, they project power usage is going to just shatter historical records. They're looking at 4,244 billion kilowatt hours in 2026.
Up to 4,381 billion by 2027. I mean, to ground those numbers in reality for you, we are talking about single data center campuses that demand as much constant electricity as a mid-sized American city.
Wow, a whole city.
Yeah, and the traditional utility grid simply was not engineered for this. It was built to distribute power widely to residential neighborhoods, not to dump gigawatts into a single industrial park.
Which makes sense. And that severe strain is why the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FURC, is actually scrambling right now to rewrite grid connection rules by June of 2026.
Right. They're essentially telling these massive tech companies that they cannot just siphon off the public grid anymore, not without risking rolling blackouts for regular citizens.
So they might force data centers to bring their own power plants.
Exactly. Power isn't just an ESG public relations stunt anymore. It's a matter of sheer corporate survival. Energy is the absolute bottleneck of the entire AI revolution.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because major tech firms are suddenly pouring billions into next-generation nuclear energy projects, right?
They are. They're desperately trying to secure guaranteed 247 power for the next 50 years.
But wait, building a nuclear power plant takes the better part of a decade? Even those newer, small modular reactors?
Oh, absolutely. There are regulatory hurdles, environmental reviews, complex construction timelines.
So if the AI boom needs all this unprecedented power today, in 2026, aren't these tech companies going to hit a massive wall way before those nuclear reactors ever actually turn on?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question hanging over the market right now.
Hmm.
The nuclear strategy is really a long-term play for the 2030s.
So what's the bridge until then?
To bridge the gap for the next 5 to 7 years, we are seeing a massive resurgence in natural gas contracts.
Ah.
And this ties directly into the broader economic landscape right now. Under the current Trump administration, there's been a heavy prioritization of deregulation, domestic industrial power, and rebuilding traditional American infrastructure.
Right, that domestic energy dominance push.
Exactly. It's providing a very favorable regulatory environment for these companies to rapidly expand natural gas power generation,
Hmm.
just to keep the AI servers running while the nuclear projects slowly navigate the pipeline.
So, as an everyday investor looking at an AI company, you shouldn't just be asking how many software engineers they hired.
No, not at all. You need to look at their balance sheets and ask, do they have physical grid access? Have they logged in a 10-year natural gas contract?
Because all that electricity is totally useless without the highly specialized hardware to channel it into actual computing power. The electrons need a brain to flow through.
Which brings us perfectly to the next layer of the supply chain, the chips, the ingredients and the recipes of our cake.
Right. And everyone knows NVIDIA designs the most famous AI chips. But the raw data from early 2026 shows that the hardware ecosystem is expanding way beyond just one company.
It really is. Look at TSMC, the company in Taiwan that physically manufactures these chips,
Yeah.
and ASML, the company in the Netherlands that builds the machines to print the chips. Both of them recently raised their financial guidance.
Let's actually quickly clarify what ASML does because it's
It
fascinating.
is wild technology.
They build these machines that use extreme ultraviolet light to print microscopic pathways onto silicon wafers. And these machines cost hundreds of millions of dollars each.
Yeah, and they're so complex, they literally require multiple 747 airplanes just to ship one of them.
Right. So when a company like that says their AI demand is, quote, extremely strong, it completely counters the narrative some skeptics were pushing earlier this year. The whole idea that the AI hardware bubble was about to pop.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is that the accelerated factory expansions from TSMC and ASML are undeniable, physical proof that the hardware boom is not over.
I mean, Jensen Huang himself recently stated that NVIDIA's Blackwell and Rubin chip series represent a $1 trillion revenue opportunity by late 2027.
1 trillion. And we are seeing Amazon's cloud division, AWS, committing to buying 1 million NVIDIA GPUs by 2027 too.
I want to introduce a culinary analogy here to explain a really massive shift the data is pointing to within this chip layer. It's the difference between training an AI and what they call inference.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think of training an AI like sending someone to an elite, super demanding culinary school. It takes months, it costs an absolute fortune in tuition, and it requires intense, isolated focus.
Right, and that is what those massive, initial, super expensive computer chips were doing. Processing the entire internet to teach the AI everything about the world.
But inference is entirely different. Inference is the day-to-day work of that chef actually standing on the line in a busy restaurant, right? Cooking individual dishes for hundreds of hungry customers every single night.
It's the daily application of the knowledge they gained in school. And what is incredibly telling for investors is how the market focus has fundamentally shifted based on that exact dynamic.
How so?
Well, a year ago, the market was obsessed with building the absolute strongest, most expensive training hardware, getting the chef through school.
Right.
Today, the focus is pivoted to creating the most cost-effective inference stack. The daily cooking on the restaurant line is where the massive scale and recurring revenue exist.
So it's no longer just about evaluating a single isolated processor chip.
Exactly. The value is now in the entire surrounding hardware system. Having a genius chef is completely pointless if they have to walk a mile to the pantry for every single ingredient.
You need high bandwidth memory, or HBM, which essentially puts the digital pantry right next to the cutting board so the chip can access data instantly.
Building on that, you also need advanced packaging. That's the specialized engineering required to cram the processor and the memory together incredibly tightly without them melting each other.
Oh, wow, yeah, the heat must be intense.
Plus, you need miles of high-speed networking cables to ensure thousands of chips can talk to each other without even a millisecond of delay. The companies making that specific memory, the thermal packaging, the cables, they're becoming just as vital as the headline chip designers.
Okay, so you've got the raw power, you have the ultra-fast chef, and you've built the perfect pantry. Now you need to construct the industrial kitchen to house all of it.
Layer 3, the infrastructure.
Yes, and we need to just banish the word cloud from our vocabulary here. We're not talking about invisible digital mist.
Yeah.
We are talking about colossal, heavy real estate.
What NVIDIA likes to call AI factories.
The sheer volume of capital flowing into this real estate is historic. Global data center investments from 2025 to 2028 are projected to hit $2.9 trillion.
And the individual price tags are just staggering. A group including Microsoft, NVIDIA, and BlackRock is acquiring aligned data centers for roughly $40 billion.
40 billion. And Google is pouring 40 billion into 3 new Texas data centers by 2027. Meta just expanded its Texas data center investment to 10 billion.
It's incredible. And as an everyday investor, it's hard to wrap your head around why a building full of computers suddenly costs $40 billion.
Well, what's the mechanism behind that cost?
It's pure physics. A traditional data center built for regular cloud computing just uses heavy-duty air conditioning. But AI processors run so intensely hot that air cooling no longer works at all.
Right.
These new AI factories require complex liquid cooling infrastructure, literally pumping miles of fluid directly over the processors.
That sounds incredibly expensive.
It is. Furthermore, the physical server racks are so dense and heavy with specialized hardware that the concrete floors of the buildings themselves have to be massively reinforced with extra steel, just so they don't collapse under the weight.
Let me challenge the bullishness on this layer, though. This is incredibly capital intensive. When you are deploying tens of billions to reinforce concrete and pump liquid coolant, the margin for error seems razor thin.
It is the most capital intensive and therefore riskiest layer of the whole cake.
Right, because anyone with a massive corporate credit line can go out and buy servers. How do these infrastructure companies actually guarantee they aren't just building massive money pits?
That is the exact risk investors need to evaluate. The true winners here are not the ones blindly building facilities and hoping clients show up. The sustainable returns will come from companies locking down the underlying assets in advance.
Okay, do you have an example?
Take a company like CoreWeave.
Yeah.
Their valuation surged recently, not just because they built a data center, but because they secured a massive, long-term guaranteed contract with the AI firm Anthropic.
Ah, so they operated like a commercial real estate developer. You don't pour the concrete for a billion-dollar shopping mall unless you already have a massive anchor tenant signed on a 10-year lease.
Exactly. Infrastructure without a guaranteed customer is just an expensive, depreciating liability. CoreWeave secured the revenue before the servers ever booted up.
Okay, so the concrete is poured, the liquid cooling is pumping, and the chefs are in the kitchen. Who is actually operating the equipment?
That moves us up to layer 4, the models.
These are the software brains doing the actual thinking inside these factories. And based on recent analysis, the era of bragging about having the biggest, most general, know-it-all AI model is officially over.
Yeah, the initial public hype was driven by a single universal chatbot that could theoretically write a poem, code a basic website, and give you a recipe for meatloaf.
But the multi-billion-dollar enterprise market does not want a jack-of-all-trades that occasionally just makes things up.
Right. Right now, we are seeing major companies pivot hard. OpenAI launched an enterprise service called Frontier, along with a highly specific cybersecurity model called GPT 5.4 Cyber, and even a life sciences model called GPT Rosalind.
But interestingly, OpenAI is facing some serious questions from investors over its massive $852 billion valuation.
They are, especially when you look at the self-reported annualized revenue estimates from early 2026. OpenAI is sitting at around $20 billion, while their primary rival, Anthropic, is hitting around $9 billion.
Here's where it gets really interesting. That $9 billion for Anthropic is huge, because it isn't coming from college students using a free tier to write history essays.
No, it is being generated through hardcore enterprise integration. The financial media loves to fixate on vanity metrics, like how many millions of daily active users a free chatbot has.
But the data shows those casual users are incredibly expensive to support and rarely convert to high-paying customers.
Yeah.
Right? So why are these companies suddenly making hyper-specific models, like one just for biology, instead of one big model that does everything?
Because a generic model is prone to hallucinations. It confidently guesses when it doesn't know the answer. A pharmaceutical giant cannot afford an AI that hallucinates a biological compound.
And a bank cannot use an AI that guesses on a cybersecurity protocol.
Precisely. Specialized models are trained exclusively on rigorous, industry-specific data. That secure integration is where the high-margin, sticky, recurring revenue lives. The market has stopped caring about casual daily users. They only care about which models are becoming indispensable money-making tools for high-paying industries.
Which leads us directly to the very top of Jensen's cake, the applications layer, the icing.
This is where those specialized models actually interact with the real world, and where the ultimate economic value is realized for everyday businesses.
This is the critical payoff, right? The billions spent on nuclear power, silicon chips, and reinforced real estate have to eventually translate into actual, measurable productivity gains.
They do. And the data shows those gains are happening right now in very traditional industries.
Yeah, AWS launched Amazon Biodiscovery in mid-April to automate drug exploration. Novo Nordisk is partnering with OpenAI to dramatically speed up their drug development pipeline.
And in the heavy industrial space, Cadence and NVIDIA are using AI to slash the time it takes to train physical warehouse robots.
Yeah.
Even in traditional finance, American Express just bought an AI expense management startup called Hyper.
I want to clarify something for you listening right now, just to ground this in reality. AI in biology isn't magically printing new pills in a lab entirely by itself.
No, not at all.
It's acting as a relentless super assistant. It's cutting down the thousands of hours that human researchers used to spend doing literature analysis and clinical trial prep into a matter of seconds.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the true application layer isn't consumer chatbots. When American Express uses AI to process millions of employee expense reports instantly, it eliminates human error and saves tens of millions in administrative bloat.
That is real money hitting the bottom line.
Exactly. The companies that will see their stock rise aren't the ones just putting AI in their press releases. They are the traditional B2B businesses quietly using these tools to dramatically slash labor costs in everyday workflows.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, and your wallet? Let's bring this all together into the global investor perspective.
Well, the current macroeconomic picture is heavily weighted toward the United States right now. Global capital is flowing rapidly back into the U.S. stock market, reviving what Wall Street calls the TINA trade.
There is no alternative. Investors look at the global landscape, weigh the risks, and decide American markets are the only viable safe haven for large-scale capital.
This influx is being driven by hopes for geopolitical ceasefires, incredibly strong U.S. corporate earnings, and a surprising resilience to global energy shocks. And sitting right at the center of this movement is American AI leadership.
It's acting as the core engine pulling the entire U.S. stock market upward. But that reliance on AI brings us back to the physical reality we've been discussing, doesn't it?
It does. And this is a crucial warning for anyone deploying capital right now. AI is fundamentally a massive physical infrastructure cycle, not just a software theme.
Right.
If you only invest in the top app, layer the icing on the cake, you are missing half the picture and exposing your portfolio to tremendous unseen risk. The real bottlenecks restricting growth aren't software bugs.
The bottlenecks are local power grids, copper supply chains, and cooling pipe manufacturing.
Exactly. If the market ties its hopes too strongly to software leadership without respecting these physical limits, it's highly vulnerable. A localized energy shortage or a sudden spike in raw material costs for data centers could send financial shockwaves right back up the cake.
That is a really vital perspective to keep in mind. Okay, let's do a rapid-fire recap of the entire five-layer cake for everyone.
Let's do it.
We start at the bottom with layer 1, energy. Without power, nothing turns on. Making utility grids and nuclear or gas contracts the ultimate foundation.
Which flows into layer 2,
Yeah.
chips, where the focus is shifted from expensive training hardware to efficient inference systems and advanced memory.
Those chips have to be housed in layer 3, infrastructure. The incredibly expensive liquid-cooled real estate secured by long-term anchor tenants.
Inside those buildings operate layer 4 models, which are moving away from generic chatbots into highly specialized, secure enterprise brains.
And finally, layer 5, applications, where traditional businesses use those brains to slash administrative costs and boost their actual profit margins.
Every single layer is intrinsically linked. A failure or a shortage at any lower level actively starves the levels above it of resources.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought to ponder as we wrap up today. If energy generation is truly the ultimate, unavoidable bottleneck at the very bottom of this cake, what happens in a few years when the sheer power draw becomes too much for a region to handle?
That's a great question.
What happens when local municipal governments have to make the hard choice between keeping the air conditioning running in residential neighborhoods or powering massive corporate AI data centers?
Yeah, will raw AI processing power eventually become a heavily regulated national security resource, just like oil or fresh water?
Something to think about as you watch this space evolve over the next few years.
The physical realities of our world will always eventually dictate the limits of our digital dreams.
Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button.